Greetings, this is Frosty Thundertrod, and today I am going to talk about Rangers and Ashes of Creation. Coming up on December 19th, there is going to be another developer showcase. This is going to be in regards to the Ranger. This is actually the third developer showcase that the Ranger has received. The first one was back before Alpha 1, then there was another one after Alpha 1. And this one is a lead into Alpha 2. In fact, during the showcase, they're going to announce which quarter of next year Alpha 2 will be starting in. I'm believing that the Ranger class has been significantly reworked from the last Ranger demo we had. And I think this showcase will actually be more keyed into just the Ranger archetype specifically, as to where the last Ranger showcase was more based on ranged combat. While ranged combat is an important component of the Ranger, it's not all the Ranger has to offer. So with that, let's start with what is a Ranger. In real life, the word Ranger appeared in England in the 1200s or the 13th century as a derivative of a French word. Rangers and bounders patrolled the outer lands and borders of a lord or a king, providing a law enforcement service. They often spent most of their time on the road, often mounted and traveling around. Later on, as England developed into more of a nation state, Ranger bounders became more like a border patrol, patrolling the border between England and Scotland. Because the Scots, while they were unable to consistently defeat the British in the English, not the British, the English in a straight up military campaign, they did have a lot of successful raids into England for resources. So it became a good idea to have a skilled, highly mobile, quick response force that was skilled in what we would call asymmetric warfare these days, but back then would have been just called raiding or Celtic warfare. While these rangers, could fight in formation, with the regular infantry, they were trained to work the best in small groups or even alone to take down small groups or single raiders coming into the territories that they were assigned to guard. As England evolved into Great Britain and became an empire, the Rangers became the law enforcement arm of the colonies. The American Rangers also took a lot of identity from the Native American tribes. Because while they were constantly fighting at least one Native American tribe, there was always another Native American tribe that was allied with the colonists and was fighting alongside of them. And therefore, they would often be fighting with the Rangers or even as the Rangers. In the 19th century, the term Ranger had kind of phased out of style. It was a bit remembered. But then Texas, during its brief stint as an independent nation, created the Texas Rangers, which was a quasi-military and quasi-police force to patrol the vast open areas of the then nation of Texas, now the state of Texas. Eventually, as Texas became a state inside of the United States instead of an independent nation, the Texas Rangers lost their military focus but retained their police focus and becoming basically the state police force for the state of Texas. In the 20th century, Rangers made another reappearance. In World War I, the Rangers were a highly mobile reconnaissance division. But instead of being pure scouts, Rangers were also meant to be able to attack targets of opportunity. So not only did they just go out and find things for the main army to attack, if it was a good target and it was weakly defended, they would go ahead and attack it itself. Force recon is another term for this role. And about this time, shortly after World War One, the Army Rangers went kind of dormant since the United States largely demilitarized. But then Teddy Roosevelt, when he founded the national parks, decided he needed a police force to patrol and control the national parks. So the National Park Service created the Park Rangers to be a law enforcement branch and a custodian branch of, the National Park Service. Over time, this has changed so much, and while the park rangers still have some law enforcement capability, it's more like a let's say auxiliary law enforcement. They won't do primary law enforcement, but they do handle crimes and disruptions, disorderly conduct, and such within the park. And they usually then just turn these people over to local police for prosecution. If you're going to get a ticket from a ranger, you're probably going to get a ticket for, littering or something like that, as opposed to, like a drunken disorderly. During World War II, the Rangers made a reappearance. With the advent of maneuver warfare, it became highly advantageous to have units which could operate independently and with great speed, agility, and accuracy. They were actually modeled after the British commando units. So they were a highly skilled unit that would, go out, find the enemy, engage the enemy, disengage, go after specialized targets. Good examples where, they would be inserted behind enemy lines to try to disrupt supply networks and stuff before offensive operations. Modern Rangers are in the Army still continue and most often are used as paratroopers or airborne infantry. So while yes, a ranger can still fight, has infantry, it's kind of a waste of a ranger's unique abilities to go out, find the enemy, kill the enemy, and then get away before any sort of serious retaliation can come their way. Now, Rangers in fiction have some ties into the real life Rangers, but they vary quite seriously. At this point, I'm going to completely throw out the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers because they're kind of their own thing and they don't really tie into the Ranger mythos other than being a relatively small elite force of fighters. That's their only real tie to the traditional Ranger. It's kind of like the Sailor Scouts being called sailors, even though they really have nothing to do with sailing at all. I mean, it's just the old-fashioned school uniforms that they wear in the anime. So, in fiction, some of the earliest depictions of Rangers was people like Robin Hood, who was actually kind of an anti-Ranger since he was a bandit, stealing the king's taxes and giving it away to the so-called poor. Really what he was doing is he was just, stealing from the tax collector and then spending it at the local bar, so he was kind of giving it back to the locals in a way. If Robin Hood is truly a real person, which is not completely clear, it's most likely the Tale of Robin Hood as an amalgamation of several people doing that sort of thing during that period of time. Then the next incursion of the Rangers kind of occurred in the Tolkien worlds of Lord of the Rings, where you had Argon, a human ranger whose primary weapon is a sword, but he also uses archery. Also is quite often mounted. And then Legolas, the super-powered elf ranger who uses primarily a bow, but he does occasionally use a sword, and sometimes he is mounted. But generally, he's depicted more on foot, jumping through the trees. This already begins to show kind of the dual nature of rangers in fiction. Then we come into modern RPGs with Dungeons and Dragons. In Dungeons and Dragons, rangers were a fighter, a warrior class that was not as specifically focused on melee or weapon combat as the fighter was. They would often fight with both melee weapons and ranged weapons. In time, it became part of their mythos to fight to dual wield. That became a standard part of the class fantasy of rangers, is dual wielding melee weapons. Driz Duorn is a good example of this. They also began to be given some small amounts of druidic magic or nature magic. And it also became very common for rangers to have animal companions. My acid reflex is acting up, so I'm chewing on a Tums here while I'm trying to talk. But as other RPG systems came along, they tried to pigeonhole rangers mostly in archery, into the archery pigeonhole. They made them archers. Archers first, archers last, archers, 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 and then some games like WoW don't specifically have the ranger, but they have the hunter, which is essentially a ranger with just a slightly different name. And the hunter, the woodsman, the recon, the scout, the special operative have all kind of combined together into the ranger class with just a slight bit of magic thrown in because, a little bit of magic is always good for flavor. Now, here's how I play Ranger. I play the Ranger as a skirmisher. For me, I don't want to focus on just one type of combat. I want to be able to switch back and forth between ranged, between melee, just that little bit of magic to go with it. An animal companion. Maybe I can set some traps and lure my opponents into the traps. Or if I know that I got to protect an area, I'll just set traps where hostiles have to go over those traps. Landmines essentially. So that's how I play Rangers. A lot of people still try to do the melee Rangers, and there are a lot of people that insist that if you're not using a bow, you're not Rangering correctly. My guild, the Sunder Guard, was originally started as a Ranger's Brother guild for the game Shadowbane. We have evolved beyond that at this point because we've gone into many different games over the years. And some of these games just don't have a ranger in them. Especially sci-fi games like EVE Online that we played for quite a while. There's no ranger archetype in that game. So let's talk about rangers here in Ashes of Creation. There's two ways you can play a ranger. Either you can be your ranger as your first archetype, or you can be ranger as your second archetype. This gives rangers in Ashes of Creation a massive amount of flexibility. You know, you can't really pigeonhole a ranger that much in this game. But to be fair, that applies to every archetype as well. But rangers, by in and of themselves, are naturally tended more towards a very diverse playset. So let's take a look here. If you start off as a ranger and then add fighter, you become a strider. Now I see this as kind of your maneuver soldier. This one probably is going to be more of a melee fighter, but instead of, standing in the front line, charging, they're probably going to be someone who moves around a lot, tries to flank. Ranger tank is a sentinel. I'm not sure I like that name for this class, but with 64 classes, I mean, some of the names aren't going to be able to fit very well because there's only so many possible names they can use for each archetype, and they're all in here somewhere. So I would say the Ranger Sentinel has a class fantasy is someone who's focused more on defending their territory. This is not so much a town guard, but if you have like a watch post or something outside of the node, sentinels will be the ones manning those. Ranger Rogue, this is Scout. I could see this because the Rogue gets stealth abilities. Typically speaking, Rogue are more utility and less direct combat, although in modern RPGs, Rogues have been given a lot more sheer DPS, just so they have something to do other than traps and locks. Ranger is called the Hawkeye. This, I think, is probably going to be your true bow-focused class. Because Hawkeye is usually a title giving to a very accurate archer or rifleman. Ranger Mage is the Scion. I think they actually missed the point here. They probably should have called it an Arcane Archer. This is a common class fantasy, but the Arcane Archer is usually more of a fighter mage than a ranger mage. Although I do believe Arcane Archer was a kit for 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. Ranger Summoner is the Falconer. This is a good class. This is a traditional class. Now imagine that the Falconer will be summoning, a falcon. Falconing was a hunting technique used to hunt small prey in open areas such as plains, steppe, or even desert. So I think this is actually going to be a very good PvE focused class. Ranger Cleric, the Soul Bow. The Ranger Cleric was my favorite class in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I tried it in Baldur's Gate 3. It doesn't work as well in Baldur's Gate 3, but it's definitely my favorite class in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Icewind Dale. Ranger Bard is the bow singer. Well, the bow string was a inspiration for many different string instruments. So I might see where a bow might have 3 strings, a primary shooting string and then 2 other strings that can be used to play notes to add the magical music effects to their archery. I don't really see this being more of an up-close and personal fighter. This is definitely going to be something that fights at range and provides support. Now let's go the other way around. Fighter Ranger is a hunter. Now this is definitely going to be, I would say this next to the Hawkeye is going to be your next biggest focused range damage archetype. because you're a fighter, so you're going to be, a soldier. So this is going to be like your army archers. These are going to be the archers that stand in tight formation and flood the enemy with volley after volley of arrows. Tank ranger is the warden. The warden is a classic archetype. It's a protector, it's a defender, and it is, very much within the ranger's skill set. So, yes, I actually like this one. I can see where it'd be useful. I would even try to play it. Rogue Ranger is the predator. Okay, yep, I can see this. Stealthily hunting down, attacking targets. Very much a predatory aspect. All right. Mage Ranger is the spell hunter. Once again, here we've got the uh, Arcane Archer, but I'm thinking maybe at this point, the Mage Ranger, they're probably going to use their mage abilities for most of the ranged, and they're going to fall back on their ranger abilities for more of a backup melee attack. Summoner Ranger is the Beastmaster. This is the archetype that I want. This, I'm going to say, is a pretty strong beast class. This is where you're going to have your animal companion. Cleric Ranger is the protector. Yeah, I don't really see why I'd be the protector. But once again, the Cleric Ranger was my favorite multi-class in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Icewind Dale. Then we have Bard Ranger, which is the Song Warden. Once again, a Warden is more of a strong defender, so I'm not quite sure how this would work. Because I'm thinking that the Song Warden probably is more dedicated to providing support, the buffing effects of music with some sort of nature or ranged attack backups, possibly dual wielding or something like that. But another leak that has came out is that the summoner archetype might be in Alpha 2 at start, which is good news because the summoner is the one archetype that we have got nothing about so far. And if they really are including the summoner in Alpha 2, that's a good indication that Alpha 2 might be in the second half of next year as opposed to the first half, because this is a archetype that they've done very little work on, or they've done a lot of work on and they haven't been able to get it to work right, and they just finally had a eureka breakthrough, and then Steven went and leaked on Twitter. But that's what I wanted to say about Ranger today. Thank you very much for watching.